Hello, this is Faith from Faith and Books, and let's see if I can get this tag done. This is my third attempt. I'm redoing it because I mentioned books by Beverly Cleary before, and that was then the next day I think she passed away. So I wanted to revise it a little bit. But this is the Life Stories tag, and I saw it done by Sean Standfast, and I believe it originated with Book Time with Elvis, which is a new channel to me, which I've gone and seen a couple of things by him, and I enjoyed it. So I'll put those links below. And here is the tag. It's called Life Stories. 1, do you have a preference for biography or autobiography? And I thought about it, and I don't really. And I'm not sure the difference between an autobiography and a memoir. I tend to really like things where they call them memoirs. And maybe an autobiography is something that starts with their birth and up to the time that they're writing the story or their life story. And maybe memoir is more narrow, kind of retelling with a specific lens that they're looking at things through. I'm not sure. But I like either one. I don't think it really matters as long as it's well written and it's interesting. Prompt number 2, do you gravitate towards a specific area like sports, celebrity, history, etc.? I think usually I read historical figures or writers. Like the most recent one that I read was Beatrix Potter, A Life in Nature, which I enjoyed very much. And what other biographies have I read? I read a lot of people right now are reading John Adams by David McCullough. I read that pretty recently. Yeah, they're sprinkled throughout. Oh, I read the dual biography of Louisa May Alcott and her father, Bronson Alcott. So those are historical figures or writers, right? Sometimes I'll read a celebrity, like I think I've read Neil Young's, what's it called, Waging Peace or something. It's not worth reading. Don't worry about it. But yeah, occasionally I'll read. I remember enjoying Gilda Radner's. That was a beach book. We were at a beach house and it was on the shelf and I picked it up and read it and I enjoyed. I always liked Gilda Radner. Although she had quite the life. She didn't have, But anyway, it was interesting to me. And I can read biographies of obscure people, and that's okay. I'm a believer, so I like reading conversion stories, like the great conversion story memoir is The Seven-Story Mountain by Thomas Merton, and I really enjoyed the 2 memoirs or autobiographies. I don't know what you call them, by Father Walter, and I'm not sure how to say it, Chisek, but he was in the Soviet Union. He was imprisoned, and then he was, hard labor in Siberia for, I think, 25 years or something. I'm not recalling now, but he wrote 2 books about it when he finally got released. He got released by the Kennedy administration, and his first book was With God in Russia, which was just a memoir of his time in the Soviet Union where he was imprisoned and everything. And then this, and I read that one. I don't know where that copy is, but this is his sort of spiritual memoir of the same experience. So quite fascinating, really riveting, pretty amazing. So those are the types that I gravitate to. Prompt 3 is, have you ever read the life story of someone and in doing so change your opinion of them for better or worse? Yes, and I'll give an example of for better and for worse and then for better. A long time ago, I went through a Muriel Spark phase where I read a lot of her work. I remember absolutely loving The Mendelbaum Gate and A Far Cry from Kensington, and she wrote others that I read, and I really enjoyed her. And then, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, I stumbled across her autobiography called Curriculum Vitae, and I didn't like her. I did not like. It seemed to me that she was sort of self-aggrandizing and kind of justifying kind of bitchy things she did to people or bad decisions she's made, and it seemed kind of, I didn't like her. I simply didn't like. By the end of the book, I was like, ooh. So I've never picked up a Muriel Spark book since. I should probably try her again, especially Mendel Baumgate, because I remember really loving that book. Because, you do have to learn to differentiate between the writer and their work. A writer can be a really, really flawed human being, but they write great stuff, So I don't think it's good to conflate the two. But anyway, I did not enjoy reading her book, Curriculum Vitae. On the other hand, I've always kind of had a little crush on Sidney Poitier. And I always thought he was a good actor. I've liked every movie he's been in. And just on an impulse, I saw an audio edition of his memoir, The Measure of a Man. And I listened to it when I had to go on a long drive. He reads it. It's so good. And it was kind of the opposite of Muriel Spark. He was really doing soul searching, and he was talking about where he really failed, and what he when he looked back at himself, where did he go wrong? He was trying to be really honest, and he was trying to figure himself out, and it was really thoughtful, and it was quite profound. I really liked him. I was just in love with him, listening to him read his own memoir, and just he's so brilliant. So yeah, Measure of the Man by Sidney Poitier. If you can get it on audio, I highly, highly recommend it. Prompt number 4. Must you always know who the person is before picking up their life story? No. No, if it's well written and interesting and it takes me in the first couple of pages, then I'm fine. I think a book that I read and enjoyed was Running with Scissors by Austin Burroughs. He was autistic, or is autistic, and his memoirs of his childhood he had a bizarre childhood, but back before they really knew about autism, or they were just starting to find out about it and figure out how best to, take care of children like that, raise them, teach them, approach them. And so I thought that was interesting. That was a book I just picked up. Let's see. Prompt 5. Have you ever met someone whose autobiography you've read? No. Well, I forgot to get the book. In a way, two books like that. Not really. But I went way back. I was really into the whole, in the 80s when the big thing was to take hostages, and the Lebanon civil war was going on and stuff. I got really into following the story of this one guy who got captured and kidnapped with Terry Anderson. And I was really riveted by the whole thing, and I think I must have originally gotten this book out of the library or something, and I read it, and I really, really liked it. And my husband heard, I think it might have been a birthday gift for me, heard that he was coming to a bookstore in D.C., in Washington, D.C., and he went and he got the book, and he got Terry Anderson to sign it for me. So isn't that something? So that was really neat. So if you want to read really good, I really like the prison memoirs. I tend to really like those. But if you want to read a really good story, this guy will, really inspirational. So yeah, Terry Anderson, Den of Lions. And then what was the other one I was going to say? Oh, and I forgot to get it. It's downstairs in my dining room. My grandfather wrote a memoir. And he passed away when I was 3 or 4. And I've only ever read the first part of it, though, because the first part is him recalling his childhood, and that's a really interesting part. But then once he got into where he's working, he's really involved in the coal miners union, it gets really technical about the strikes and the deals they're negotiating, and this person, that person gets really, really technical and really, really fact-driven. And to me, it becomes unreadable. So my own grandfather, I haven't read his whole memoir. But yeah, so I sort of, I knew him when I was a child. I'm related to him. And he did write a memoir, which I have not completely read. So that's my answer for that one. Let's see. Prompt number 6. What do you think about books that are described as semi-autobiographical? I think that's really interesting because it adds a layer of interest, I think, to the whole thing. So, yeah, and that's good. I'm fine with that. In fact, you have to write about what you know. So I think a lot of novels have aspects of being semi-autobiographical because they're pulling in experiences that they've had and maybe they're changing them to fit the storyline or something. But still, I think there's a lot of that going on. Prompt number 7, give an example of a life story that really surprised you. So this is where I want to talk about Beverly Cleary because, I knew her as a children's writer and, Ramona and Henry Huggins and Ralph S. Mouse and all those books that we all enjoyed. But a few years ago, somehow I stumbled across the fact that she had written not one but 2 memoirs. And I knew nothing about her life except she was in Oregon. And I read them and they were really, really good. I highly recommend these 2 memoirs. The first one about her childhood. She had a rough childhood in the Depression with kind of a dysfunctional family. A Girl from Yam Hill. And then where that one ends, the second one takes off, and that's during World War II and her young adult life, her young married life. And that one's called My Own 2 Feet. So I highly recommend those 2 memoirs by Beverly Cleary, especially now that she's passed away. I feel like finding copies of them and owning them because I really enjoyed them so much. Prompt 8, what biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, etc. are currently on your TBR? Well, I think as I said before, in April I'm planning to join the presidential read-along, and we're going to read about Thomas Jefferson, and the book we're going to read is Thomas Jefferson, An Intimate Life by Fawn M. Brody. So that's on my immediate TBR. But there are 2 other books that I've been wanting to read. These are both like memoirs or autobiographies. One is the autobiography of Arthur Ransom, because I'm trying to read through the Swallows and Amazons series, and that is out of print. It's hard to get a hold of it. So I'm looking for that. And then for a couple of years now, I've been wanting to get a hold of, and I think it's also out of print, E.B. White's One Man's Meat, which is his memoir of life on his farm. And so those 2 memoirs or that autobiography I've been thinking about for over a year now, wanting to read those 2. All right, let's see. Prompt number 9. Whose life story did you find particularly hard going? Either emotionally difficult to read or very boring. I tried to read Patti Smith's book, Memoirs, called Just Kids, about her and Robert Mapplethorpe. Because I remember when I was a disaffected teen, I was really into Patti Smith. And I tried to read that, and no. She's trying to paint this sort of poetic, sympathetic take on things, but no, they were just 2 awful kids doing lots and lots of depraved, selfish things. I couldn't finish reading it. It was just, there's no excuse for that kind of behavior. Okay, chapter 10, prompt 10. Is there anyone you know personally who you feel should have their life story written down? Yes, there is a Vietnamese man and his wife at my church, and their story of how they escaped from Vietnam and then wound up living I don't know how many years in a refugee camp in Thailand is just harrowing and just amazing. He and his wife were, I think, newly married. They might have had at least 1 child. They were trying to escape. It was when the fall and the communists were coming in, and they got a boat, and they had a bunch of people on the boat, and they were trying to escape, and it was just harrowing. He didn't know what he was doing. He's trying to pilot this boat through the ocean, and the pirates chase them. There are all these pirates in those waters, and he spent like 2 days trying to outsmart these pirates. And then they finally got to Thailand, and they were like taken into this refugee camp, and it was hell. It was absolutely hell. He learned how to deliver babies. He's not a doctor. He learned how to deliver babies because there was no medical help. And he wound up being like one of the people that was trying to bring order and some sort of government, like democracy, to this refugee camp. And he would be ones to negotiate. And his name got around to Catherine Graham, who, owned the Washington Post at the time. She was over there and she asked to meet him. He had no idea who she was. And so, they had an interpreter and everything. And then she helped get him out. She helped get him out of Thailand and to the United States. Now, she was going to sponsor him, but he wound up getting sponsored by someone else. Anyway, but then she gave him a job, and he worked for the Washington Post for a couple of decades. So it's just a fascinating story, just incredible. And he says, even to this day, he still has nightmares about it. And they have so many weird health problems because of all the deprivation they went through when they were in Vietnam and then when they were in this refugee camp. Really harrowing story. It would be really great if somebody wrote his and his wife Grace's story down. Just absolutely amazing story. Anyway, so that would be the person I think should have their life story written down. Prompt number 11. Have you read any diaries or collections of letters? And if so, which ones did you find interesting? I'm just going to list two. This is really interesting about this woman, turn of the last century in France, who marries a doctor who's an atheist, but she reverts to her faith, which was Catholicism. And even though she loves her husband, he loves her, she can never share with him her faith. And so it was something they just couldn't talk about. And she had to travel in his sort of circle of friends, and they were all atheists. And so it was very oppressive. But she kept this journal. She kept this diary. And then she got sick and died, and her husband was devastated because they actually did love each other, even though there was this huge thing that they didn't relate to each other on. But after she died, he read her diary, and he realized what he had done, like what he had lost and what he had done to her by being so domineering about the atheism thing. And he wound up experiencing this incredible conversion, and he became a priest. So it's very interesting. Now, it is her diary, and she had the same problems all through her marriage. And so it can be a little bit redundant. I might have edited a little bit better or something, but still, I found this really, really interesting. The other thing is something that I want to read that my sister has read over and over, and she's always recommending it, and it is The Letters of Vincent van Gogh. And I've had this sitting on my shelf for a while now, and I really should read it. I really should read it. She says it's just great. So this is kind of a TBR thing. Oh, I lost my list of questions here. Okay. All right. And then the last prompt is number 12. What are a few life story books you would recommend to us to read? The one I always want to recommend to everybody, and I think every American should read, is the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. It's not a hard read. It's not a long read, but it's a first-hand account of slavery, what it was like, and how he escaped, and how he got involved in the abolition movement, and how he self-educated, and how he became this great statesman. And he went on, he had a friendship with Lincoln. He went on to be our ambassador to Haiti. He became a very well-respected and very learned man. And his house is here in D.C. in Anacostia. I've been to it a couple times. He's absolutely fascinating. He's a really admirable person. So I think everybody should be required reading for everybody to read the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. So that's the one I'm gonna recommend to everybody. So that's it. Doesn't say to tag other people, so just consider yourself tagged if you're interested in this, and I will leave the questions below. All right, take care now. Hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.